Hello and a very warm welcome to Moneycontrol.com. I am Shweta Punj. India is battling a war against food inflation. Prices of items such as tomatoes and onions have gone up exponentially, so much so that prices of tomatoes have gone up by nearly 700%. And we do know that stable food prices are very important for governments to win or lose elections. To understand the aggressive price control measures that the government is taking, and if they will indeed help in bringing inflation down, or will they end up antagonizing the farmers? I am joined with Mr. Indra Shekhar Singh, former director of the National Seed Association of India. He's joining us from Hisar, and I'm joined by my colleague Agrita Chatterjee, who has been closely tracking the story. But before I go across to them, let's quickly listen in to what the Commerce and Industry Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, said today about the war against food inflation.
इस वर्ष हमने अभी तक 3 लाख टन 1.5 लाख टन नैफेड द्वारा 1.5 लाख टन एनसीएफ द्वारा अभी तक हम खरीद चुके हैं, जिसके कारण जो किसानों का दाम बहुत ही कम था आज से महीना 1.5 महीना पहले, वो अच्छी मात्रा से बढ़ा है और किसानों को अपनी उपज के लिए सही दाम मिला है.
All right, let me quickly go across now to Indra. Indra, you've heard the minister. He has said that the government will do whatever they can to keep food inflation in check. They're very, very mindful about the fact that it could have an impact on farmers, but they're saying that food inflation needs to be controlled. I want to get your perspective on the measures that we've seen, very aggressive price control measures that we have seen by the government. Indra.
Little too late that the government is actually acting. And I would actually request you for a little recap, which is Nirmala Sitharaman during the Union Budget of 2018 actually came out and said that we are going to start an Operation Greens and an Operation Tops. Now, TOP stands for tomato, onion, and potato. So it's not like that this big thing was not in the government's agenda. We have the union budget speech of 2018, we have 2019, we have 2020. We have all these years where the government has actually put finances in to improve the freight infrastructure, to improve the storage infrastructure. And when they are battled with the first litmus test, or when they actually face the first big kind of challenge, all their schemes and all that money goes into the drain. Because one season or 2 seasons of erratic rainfall and unpredictable weather, we see that the entire agri-economy and the agrarian freight and storage units have everything is washed away because of untimely rains. Now, what does it say of the government's performance? And I'm not trying to say that this is the BJP's fault or this is Modi government's fault. I think it's a larger problem, a systemic problem, which governments of India have not been able to battle. We've been able to send things on the moon, but we've not been able to manage our tomato and onion and potato problems. There was a time when Sheila Dixit...
That's right. There is a clear dichotomy there. And, this has been a focus point for the government for a really long time. I want to bring in Adrija. Adrija, you have been speaking to government officials. I want to get a sense from you on what is the view on, onion prices, potato prices, all the price control measures that the government has taken.
Yes, Shweta, I mean, the government seems to be on a war foot with regard to trying to control prices with regard to vegetables and staples as well. We've seen the government take these many steps when it comes to rice, when it comes to trying to ensure that onion and tomato prices stay within a particular bandwidth. We have the government also putting in a 40% export duty. Very recently, there's been the rice export ban on a certain variety of rice. I mean, all these steps are being taken in order to ensure that the consumers do not get impacted in any way. Prices stay under control, but on the other hand, there are also concerns about what happens with regard to farmers' income. So that interest has also needs to start playing into government policy. If we have to believe reports, the government already thinking on the lines of how to ensure policy measure to take care of farmers' income also at a point of time when farmers in India are not getting the benefit of higher global food prices.
Right. Indra, I want to get a perspective from you on how do these measures play out on ground when it comes to farmer incomes, when it comes to general well-being of the rural economy.
See, I would like to pardon my Hindi, but this is the agrarian policy in this country is like a khichdi. Like we don't know which way we're headed. One way we want to liberalize, the other way we want to restrict. Then we are socialist. Suddenly we are free market. Suddenly the farmer has limited land, and then we want a free market on a limited means of production. So the farmer is as confused as anybody else. Like when you say that you wanted to have the farm laws and that the market dictate the agrarian production, well, that was great. Then you took that back. Now when farmers are producing and they are throwing tomatoes on the street, people will remember that there were visuals when the harvest came in. Tomato farmers were throwing tomatoes on the field. They were throwing vegetables on the field. They were throwing onion on the field. There were reported suicides this year when the onion harvest came. So then when the price of onions were 2 rupees, 3 rupees, NAFED could not come in and buy the excessive buffer stocks, knowing that next year will be an election year. Now, other government agencies could not step in and buy these commodities when they were dirt cheap. And now, when the farmers, realizing the excessive supply, are exporting, you want to come down and say that no, you farmers cannot export, but the industry can export. Industry can get maximum profits, but the farmers cannot. So, somewhere in the government's thinking, they need to understand: is agriculture food? Is it livelihood of a nation, or is it pure industry? And as soon as the government makes that clear in the policy decision, a lot more things will be easier. But the current export ban, I think it's too little and too late, and it's mismanaged, because this is going to actually upset the farmer, which are the larger electorate, and then also ensure that there are more suicides in the onion belt, because now farmers were betting on this. And it's not just the farmers. Let's talk about the small traders. Let's talk about the medium traders. Let's actually talk about the middlemen who are also trying to make an honest living. Let's talk about the big exporters. What's happening to everybody? We have to look at this from the perspective of humanity and not particular interest groups. And the humanity in the situation dictates that you need to have a clear-cut export quotas every year, understanding the weather patterns and everything. You cannot expect a normal farmer to know about what's going to happen 6 months from now in the weather. But the government has satellites, the government has AI. Why doesn't it use its sophisticated weather management and weather prediction technology to actually prepare policy in agriculture, which
Right.
at
So
least at the policy level?
there are two, three things, Indra, you're pointing out. One, if we had better food storage facilities, then the government could have procured the onions beforehand, before an election year, and use that instead of levying a 40% export duty on onions at the moment. Then you're saying that we need a far more nuanced policy, which is more which is reflective of India's changing weather patterns and so on. Yeah, when we talk about inflation, when we talk about food prices, now food prices hits home, it hits everyone equally, right? Adrija, I want you to come in here on what is the sense that you're getting from the government when it comes to food inflation being a slightly sticky subject. I know that we met Mr. Ramesh Chand last week, and he spoke about how he's not expecting agricultural growth to take a hit despite these measures and despite the protests by farmers and despite an uneven monsoon. He had said that agri growth should be on track. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, Shweta. I mean, what Ramesh Chand, who's an EPIO member and is also an agriculture economist, told us is that he expects agriculture growth to be above 3% in the current financial year. And the reasons that he gave behind that is the fact that barring August, so far rainfall, according to him, has been on track. Sowing with regard to kharif crops have also been on track, barring pulses, which he did raise was a bit of a concern. I mean, overall, according to Mr. Chand, there's no immediate shock with regard to agricultural output so far. Having said that, he also told us to be on guard about a rise in global food prices, at least until the first quarter of FY24. So, although the government is aware of the fact, and both the RBI and government has pointed out how the inflation in vegetables could be short-lived because it's not something they expect to carry on. But they've also talked about how inflation in cereals and pulses and other key staples tend to last longer. In fact, Chand pointed out to us that how when inflation seeps into products like wheat and pulses, they have the ability, or typically they stay for a year or so. So the government is definitely taking these measures in order to make sure that some kind of a lid on prices need to be maintained. But on the other hand, experts are of the view that the government needs to also ensure and take care of the interests of the farmers.
Okay, Indra, I want you to come in here. What's your sense on how bad will it get before it becomes better? Will inflation really come down? Will prices of onions, with the government selling prices onions at 25 rupees a kilogram, will that really bring inflation down? And what's the impact that you see on farmer incomes?
See, first, I'll just address your first question, your middle question first. I do not see, with the current trajectory, I do not see any food inflation going down. The only thing that will come down is our strategic foreign reserves and our treasury, our tax-paying rupees that are then further artificially subsidizing onions. I think they are going to deplete, and depleting before an election year is not healthy for the Indian economy. Now, talking about Mr. Ramesh Chand, he's part of the Niti Aayog, not to comment on him. But if economists were equated with doctors, I'll tell you that much, that they'll be sued for malpractice all the time because their predictions are often wrong. And talking about the weather, India right now is experiencing the El Nino year. Everyone in the world knows this. People like us who are on the ground, traveling from one corner of the country to the next, know that there is a big rainfall problem. There is going to be a big agricultural problem. Bipar Joy, which happened recently, upset the monsoon completely. So if anybody is expecting a good monsoon, may God be with you. But it's not going to come down very soon. And that's going to be a big problem in food production. You're right that lentils are a problem. You're right that the vegetable inflation is going to go up if the Ukraine-Russia issue further evolves, and there is further problem. Not only are we looking at wheat supplies going down, but we are also looking at the fertilizer industry heavily being impacted by that. Now, back to the situation here. I think the only way out of all of this, I think we've already lost whatever has to be lost. If the government is very, very careful, they can still curtail some of the issues that are going to happen in the future. That what I mean by that is they need to actually have realistic estimates of the Kharif. They need to understand what the problem is and start acting right now before the Kharif harvest is out. Now, for the Rabi planning, there needs to be special incentives and special bonuses given to farmers, and the reality of Indian agriculture needs to be told by the policymakers to the country. Everything cannot be dismissed as, everything is all right. We don't need to eat onions. We can have an onion fast. No, that's not the real issue. People are sweating in the sun. Temperatures are again reaching summer-like temperatures in most parts of North India. People who are daily wage laborers, they are dependent on things like legumes, rice, and maybe some onion if they are lucky. So if they don't get that, we are actually pushing, apart from the 80 crore people who depend on government rations, more people in that bracket, which will be necessarily dependent and contingent for their survival on government rations. Now, this is a very, very big food trap. And if India does not act now, we will be in a food debt trap where we will need to depend on foreign resources. We do not have the foreign reserves. We have the least amount of food strategic reserves right now. We need to pay attention to our farmers. For that is the biggest investment the government can make right now. And I hope someone is listening to this, because otherwise the Rabi and next year, we will be on the precipice of a very big food security problem. And it's already begun. We are already in the second tier of that problem. People are not talking about this, but the first food crisis started like earlier on this year. And this is the second tier. This is only going to evolve into something deeper. And I hope I'm wrong. But if I'm not, we need to all prepare for it.
Okay, very grim outlook there. Adrija, is there a sense of panic that you're picking up from the government? Because we've not seen such aggressive price control measures, since 2008, 2009, from what my memory tells me. And please, Indra, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've not seen such aggressive measures of, getting into the market and just affecting the price movement of essential commodities so aggressively. Adrija, is there a sense of desperation in the government?
Shweta, you have to realize that if you look at the latest headline retail figures, they were at 7.44%. And it was primarily due to a surge in vegetable prices and a sustained price pressure that we are seeing in key staples such as cereals and pulses. And with regard to pulses, there are also concerns about the sowing area being not as high as the government probably anticipated. So there's definitely an awareness on the part of the government that certain measures have to be taken because at the end of the day, in an election year, food inflation being at such unprecedented levels are obviously of concerns. And it is also of concerns from a very strictly economic point of view. Your inflation being outside the RBI's outer band is obviously not good news for the government. There were expectations that the interest rates would be cut by the RBI early next year, but those expectations are also fading off right now because of how inflation is expected to remain elevated for the remaining part of the current financial year. In fact, from our conversations with government officials, from what we're picking up, that they clearly are in the mood of taking more and more steps in order to curb inflation, especially on the food side of things. And when we speak to experts, they're of the opinion that the government has to definitely also look at farmers. According to a certain expert, we could look at further expanding the PM Kisan Yojana. We can also look at what more measures can be taken in terms of MSP. So these conversations, these
Right.
concerns are very much there, and we have to see global food prices evolve going on.
Okay, Indra, my last question to you. Do you think what are the short-term measures, according to you, that the government can take at this point? You heard Adrija talk about MSP interventions. You heard her talk about the PM Kisan Yojana that could be expanded. Are those the measures that you think that the government should undertake currently?
See, absolutely. But I only have reservations about, before I begin with my own set, I would just add a little caveat there that if there is no food, no matter how much money you pump into the farmer's account, it's going to be worthless. Because in the end, people need food. There's already a huge burden on the Indian PDS system, which means that 80 crore people need to be fed under the National Food Security Act. Okay. And if there are not enough production in the Kharif season and then in the Rabi season, we are looking at a major problem and no amount of money, because there is already dearth of wheat in the international market. There is already a dearth of food commodities in the international market because of the Ukraine-Russia situation. So coming back to now my suggestions, I think we need to first of all have a special agency within the government. The government needs to come out there and have a special agency which is only dedicated to basically tomato, onion, and all the staples. Whatever is the staple in this country, it needs to be dedicated to that. It needs to have procurement powers. It needs to have financial powers so that it can procure things from the farmers directly. It needs to have the power to give special MSPs in different clusters of the country so that different farmers in different areas can be empowered. And then it should have buyback guarantees with those farmers so that the Indian strategic reserves are filled. And once they are completely filled, then the next step is whatever surpluses we have, they can be put in export, because I see next year also India can become a major export hub. So India needs to there needs to be a reorganization within the Agri and the Finance Ministry. A new body needs to be created with some component players, including farmer stakeholders, including industry stakeholders and government stakeholders, which actually come together and launch this program. If we do not take care of our basically food system, it's going to be really, really bad. Then talking about MSP, if we give special bonuses, and I'm not just talking about Haryana and Punjab, which are already very well covered in the MSP program. I'm talking about the southern states. I'm talking about why not give Telangana MSP? Why not give Tamil Nadu MSP? Why not give Manipur MSP? Farmers from all these areas should be empowered and directly linked to their midday scheme programs. Okay. And I think that's the way out of all of this. Without financial incentives, all this is not going to happen.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Indra. That was a very, very insightful perspective. And Adrija, thanks so much. So clearly, the sense that one is getting is that while the government has taken on very aggressive price control measures, its impact on ground could be a little less than what they are expecting it to be. And of course, they will have to buffer these measures with measures specifically targeted towards the farm sector. Thanks so much for watching Money Control. And of course, keep tracking us for all live updates and analysis. Thanks so much.